The Lazarus Project was a Cerberus project, the sole purpose of which was to bring Commander Shepard back from the dead. When Commander Shepard was killed in a collector attack that resulted in the destruction of the SSV Normandy, Cerberus was able to recover Shepard's corpse with the help of Liara Tassoni. The Elusive Man created and funded the Lazarus Project, pouring virtually unlimited resources into the belief that only Shepard could stop the Reaper threat to humanity, as the Council stood idly by. The exorbitant project took 2 years and over 4 billion credits to complete. Undertaken by the Lazarus Cell, which was headed by Miranda Lawson and her assistant Wilson, it involved attaching cybernetic implants to reconstruct the commander's skeleton, reconstruction of the skin, and the fluids to restart blood flow and internal organs. The one thing that the Elusive Man refused to do was implant a control chip in the commander's brain, fearing that it may affect Shepard's personality and abilities. As part of the project, Shepard underwent facial reconstruction and partially lost prior abilities and talents. The project proved to be a success in 2185 when Shepard managed to regain full neurological activity. But just what can we infer from the proportionally small amount of footage we saw, and just what went into bringing Shepard back from the dead? First and foremost, let's find out exactly how Shepard died. Let's explore. The first important aspect we need to ascertain is the precise nature of Commander Shepard's death. We see him managing to eject the escape pod containing Joker from the SSV Normandy right as the collector beam cuts a portion of the ship apart, before causing an explosion which jettisons Shepard clear of the wreckage. He strikes the bulkhead during his transition and soon finds himself floating helplessly in space. It is at this point Shepard notices the breach in his suit that is rapidly venting atmosphere. After a very brief struggle attempting to stem the breach, the oxygen levels drop low enough that Shepard loses consciousness. In the vacuum of space, gas exchange in the lungs continues as normal but results in the removal of all gases, including oxygen, from the bloodstream. After between 9 and 12 seconds, the deoxygenated blood reaches the brain and results in a loss of consciousness. This is actually mirrored in real-life vacuum testing incidents involving Jim LeBlanc testing pressurized spacesuits in a vacuum chamber. At some point during the test, LeBlanc's pressurization hose became detached from his spacesuit. Even though this caused his suit pressure to drop from 3.8 psi to 0.1 psi in less than 10 seconds, LeBlanc remained conscious for about 14 seconds before losing consciousness due to hypoxia. The much lower pressure outside of the body caused rapid deoxygenation of the blood. So Shepard losing consciousness as fast as he did falls in line with expectations, but it is not fatal on its own if normal pressure and oxygen flow can be restored within 90 seconds. This wasn't the case for Shepard. The vacuum of space would also likely have caused a drop in pressure, which would normally result in the rapid boiling of bodily fluids and the embolism of the body. Contrary to popular portrayals in science fiction and cartoons, the body doesn't inflate like a balloon and burst. Plus, Shepard's wearing a suit which would have actually mechanically constrained his body. Research and experience have actually shown that while exposure to vacuum causes swelling, human skin is tough enough to withstand the drop of 1 atmosphere, and the decompression that Shepard experienced was rapid but not explosive, meaning his lungs would decompress without hemorrhaging or damaging the air sacs and oxygen carrying structures within his lungs. And again, overall, his armour would have constrained his body mechanically, preventing the embolism. Nevertheless, by this time, Shepard would be unconscious and not experiencing any of these additional uncomfortable side effects. Due to Shepard not being recovered within 90 seconds, the hypoxia that caused him to black out would now be the primary reason behind his death. Anoxia being the complete deprivation of oxygen to tissues, and more immediately, cerebral anoxia would basically be the primary cause of death for Commander Shepard. Unfortunately, it doesn't really end there for his body. It is assumed, due to his trajectory and the indications of early collision with the upper atmosphere of the planet Alshira, which has about 15% less gravity and 17% less atmospheric pressure than Earth, but that's still enough that Shepard's body then underwent an uncontrolled atmospheric re-entry. His armour and his shield seemingly staved off the worst of this process, as generally speaking anything entering a planet's atmosphere at that speed that's around the size of a human would completely burn up in atmosphere. It would appear his armour kept his body safe from the worst of the heat, but nevertheless, eventually, parts of Shepard's body would have been exposed to the intense heat of re-entry, burning and cauterizing flesh and bone. Once deep enough in the atmosphere, the re-entry heat would subside and Shepard's body would simply freefall before striking the ground, shattering most of the rest of his skeleton and causing immense blunt force trauma to his organs and soft tissues from the sudden, bone-crushing deceleration. Most of the wreckage of the Normandy, interestingly enough, was found in an icy, snow-covered tundra on this planet. Assuming that Shepard fell in roughly the same trajectory, this may have somewhat helped keep the commander's body in a preserved state. The frigid -22 degrees centigrade surface temperature would have frozen his body and thus slowed or entirely prevented the further breakdown and decomposition of his body. Shortly thereafter, Shepard's body would be recovered by Liara Tassoni and Ferron and handed over to Cerberus to undergo Project Lazarus. From the footage, we can establish that much of Shepard's body was severely burned. His skeleton had been shattered almost entirely, and many of his soft tissues and organs had been either burned, frozen, starved of oxygen, or dehydrated entirely. So Lazarus would have had to have endeavoured to bring cellular genesis online once more throughout the body using advanced chemical agents. This would rehydrate and rejuvenate the cellular activity in the body, but this is just the beginning. Complete skeletal reconstruction via surgical, cybernetic and chemotherapeutic means would have been necessary, with larger pieces of bone being surgically reconnected together, cybernetic osseo-integrated implants for larger missing sections, artificial joints where necessary, and then infusing the body with an osteogenesis compound to promote further bone growth and healing. Once these two were performed, advanced work to rebuilding and reconstructing Shepard's musculature and the skin and underlying structures would have taken place. And once this was underway, and the body had been medically rejuvenated and possibly given blood substitutes like perfluorocarbon that carry oxygen approximately 10 times more efficiently than blood, as well as containing a plethora of medications, growth factors, stem cell therapies, and much, much more, the body may then, hypothetically, begin its own gradual process of healing, although it was likely augmented thereafter heavily by organic and artificial growth factors. The implementation of numerous cybernetic implants were used to assist in bringing the body back to life, including a device attached to the heart to begin rejuvenation of the cells, and another attached to his upper lumbar, which likely served to aid his central and peripheral nervous system recover and rebuild, and also mediate the circulatory system entering the lower body. His circulatory system would need rebuilding and restarting, and up to this point it's reasonable to assume circulation was maintained either by a machine or this cybernetic device on the heart. It may have been a tiny xenopump. Cloned or artificial organs were also likely transplanted. This would have actually been relatively straightforward, as the cells that remained relatively undamaged within Shepard's body could, in theory, still contain his DNA intact. This could be used in tandem with 3D printed collagen scaffolding and advanced organ generation techniques, which would then be populated by stem cells replicated from Shepard's own DNA that would then take on the cellular identity and function of the required organ. This would ensure damaged organs wouldn't necessarily have to be saved per se, but replaced, and since they were made of Shepard's own cellular DNA, there would be no transplant rejection. In all likelihood, most, if not all, of the organs with the exception of Shepard's brain would have been cloned or engineered in this manner, making this particular part of the process actually much more straightforward. As far as Shepard's brain is concerned, however, there is likely a plethora of implanted cybernetic devices within his cerebral cortex to support his brain function. It is likely portions of Shepard's brain died entirely, being utterly unsalvageable. Using cybernetics to circumnavigate what would otherwise be profound disability would be the most logical course of action to ensure Shepard could attain his full quality of life. The fact that, upon Shepard's waking, he had lost many of his previous abilities reinforces the fact that large portions of his cerebral cortex were heavily damaged or dead entirely. Lazarus may have endeavoured to remove the dead tissue but preserve as much of the brain as possible, perhaps even using organ reconstruction or advanced stem cell therapies to actually rebuild cerebral matter in the voids now left by the excision of dead tissue. However, these portions of the brain would be without memory, function, context, or full intuitive connection to the surviving brain, so cybernetics would likely have bridged the gap. It would be analogous to removing 2 or 3 of several hard drives from your computer and replacing them with blank, solid-state drives. They're functionally different from a hard disk drive, but are capable of performing similar functions, but also lack the data that was once stored upon them. But with the right firmware, these new devices could still be utilised by the computer and eventually become part of the system. In this way, the artificially grown portions of the brain would be linked to Shepard's surviving brain via cybernetics, and over time, he'd gain full executive function over them. The cybernetics may also be the functional reason behind power retraining and advanced training functions seen on medical terminals throughout Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. So what do you think? Did I cover most of the bases in regards to what could have possibly happened in regards to how Shepard's body was brought back to life? Do you think I ticked most of the boxes in regards to how Shepard's body ultimately came to be on the planet after his untimely death? I could probably likely dive quite a bit deeper into the lore of Mass Effect and actually find ways in which memories can be transferred and this, that and the other, especially considering that there is a clone of Shepard in the games that seemingly has most of his personality. It stands to reason that there's maybe some degree of personality imprint or transition or something like that. But again, if you want me to look into that, leave me a comment down below, and until next time, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider hitting the subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Be sure to like the video if you did, and pop a comment below on what you'd like me to cover next. I just want to take a moment to thank my patrons, Spartan10148, the Metarch of my facility, Falcon, Sophia, Mikhail, Ashley, Jordan and Esoteric Sight, my dutiful monitors, Darian, Legions Lost, Lab Rat, Spartan0137, Jacob Kemp, Sean, Element Zero, J3, Mr. Keys, Gunslinger, Evermore, Personal Devil, Aldeas, Toxic, Scion Esports, Gem, Saber and Relentless, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, my loyal enforcers, and all other patrons who continue to support the channel. If you want your name on the end of the video and some perks earned along the way, head over to Patreon and consider supporting the channel yourself. Big shout out to my Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members, Spartan137, Jacob Kemp, Talia, Fenrir, Bornstella, Jimbo and Balaz, and all the other YouTube members keeping my installation running on that glorious vacuum energy, with a special mention to the Accursed Hunter. Shout out to John due to the mathematical formula used to determine the area within a pentadodecahedron. Oh, and Lena because that sandwich. And remember, there are tons of ways to support the channel and keep my installation pumping out content at a breakneck speed. Much love to you all, take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.